Good afternoon, everybody. The question that we're asked the most at the African and Oriental Travel Company is, where do I go on safari? And that's really a very complex question that requires a complex answer. We do our best to try and explain this to everybody, and sometimes I feel that it would be easier just to try and compress the entire conversation into a very short video where we can explain the pros and cons of every single global safari destination. Now we're going to concentrate on Southern Africa. Southern meaning anything south of the equator. And this is really where it all began. So let's just start in South Africa at the bottom, down here, and work our way up through all these different quite incredible countries to Kenya in the north. South Africa. South Africa is a firm favourite for many people because of its cost. It has some of the reasonably priced safaris. It has great infrastructure, and you've got around here in Cape Town, you've got the most sort of stunning cities and old sort of colonial history, and down here you've got the wineland. So there's an awful lot to do in South Africa as well as your safaris. Most of the safari areas are either in Natal down here or up here in the northern areas around Kruger National Park on the border with Mozambique. And to add to that, just over here you've got some really good scuba diving. South Africa is a pretty complex and incredible country because over here you've also got the Karoo, which is a semi-desert which divides the north and the south of the nation. And as I said before, it's got flights that go everywhere, roads that go everywhere. But because of those reasons, we tend to use South Africa as a transit point and perhaps sometimes a scuba diving location. It doesn't have the wide open spaces that are uncrowded that you find in other places. You have some incredible hospitality and some great resorts, but they are in small concessions owned by people. So you can have a 5-star experience in South Africa, but it's not your typical film set version of Africa. To the northwest of South Africa is Namibia. Now, Namibia does have the wide open spaces. Namibia has the most incredible infrastructure. It's got tarmac roads that go all the way up the entire country and down again. It's got aerodromes in the north and the south, and it's got an international airport down here at Windhoek. Namibia is also, though, a very different safari destination, and it's somewhere we would recommend people go for their second safari, because it's got an awful lot of desert. You have Etosha National Park up here, which is a sort of floodplain, and the Etosha Pan. But down here, the whole of the coast is effectively sand dunes and desert. And this is not called the Skeleton Coast for nothing. If you were a wafer seafarer coming into Cape Town or trying to go around the Cape here, and you ended up being shipwrecked on that coast, your chances of survival were so low that it was called the Skeleton Coast. Not the nicest thing in the world, but there's a reason for it. Namibia also has the Caprivi Strip, which comes all the way out here, and down here you've got some very interesting parts of Namibia, right on the border with Botswana, Zimbabwe and Zambia. So as a standalone destination, Namibia is quite good. And it's very, very barren and desolate with animals, and it's quite stunning, but you've got to drive very long distances between locations in Namibia. Where Namibia can be an absolute jewel is if you're coming in from Victoria Falls, Livingstone, and you do a safari that goes through Botswana into Namibia, and you sort of fly into Livingstone or Victoria Falls and fly out of Windhoek. Now, that brings me naturally on to Botswana. Botswana is what we call a small country in Africa, whereas it actually isn't that small. And Botswana has the Okavango Basin and the Okavango Delta, which is this area here, which is a flatland, flatlands. Well, flat and flooded. And here it has the Kalahari Desert. and here you've got the Magadi pans, and this you've got this incredible combination in Botswana. The capital is down here called Gaborone, but most of the guys don't go there. Most of the access is through a town called Maun, which is here, which has an international airport of sorts, with connections from Johannesburg, basically. But what a lot of people do, and we love sending people to do this, is fly into the Livingston Victoria Falls township, and then you do a safari into and out of the Okavango Delta. And for the more adventurous, you would then carry on through here and go up to Etosha, and then end up in Windhoek. And that's a classic, 11 to 12 day safari, which is really quite incredible. This, of course, makes us look at Zambia and Zimbabwe. Now, Zambia is famous for South Luangwa National Park, which is around about here, unless I'm highly mistaken. And it's also famous for the Victoria Falls waterfalls and the national parks around this area here. It also has North Luangwa National Park, which is further north. Zambia is it's a wonderful nation. It's got a lot of copper and industry up here. It's got one capital city and one smaller city of Livingston. Livingston is effectively a town. It's a lovely town. It's like a tourist town, and it's a lovely place to go. It's really good. Okay. And the thing about Zambia is that you have these amazing connections to Livingston from Nairobi, Addis Ababa, and Johannesburg. And you've also got them in Victoria Falls, which is the Zimbabwean township across the other side. Where you stay on either side is neither here nor there. Of course, now that I'm talking, I've suddenly realised that I'm pointing at the wrong part of the map, and South Luangwa National Park is actually up here, okay, next to the Luangwa River. So 1,000 apologies to my Zambian friends for putting my finger on the wrong place. But you get the idea. The idea is you've got an amazing world-class park here with leopards and wild dogs, and you've got some rhinos down here, and you've got the Victoria Falls and the Zambezi River, which is a 5-day journey just in itself, just to go up and down the river. Zimbabwe, for a long time, ignored by people because of political issues. Zimbabwe is now coming back into its own, and you've got some very good safaris, and you've actually got large animals and stuff on the Zimbabwe side of the border near Livingston, and you've got Hwange National Park as well. Zimbabwe is a country which used to have very good infrastructure, which was not damaged, and it's now coming back into its own. We love Zimbabwe, we love Zambia. We literally send people to whichever country they wish to go to if they want to go to the falls. For instance, if you're flying on Ethiopian Airlines, they fly into the Zimbabwean side of the border, so we generally say, why don't you stay there? If people are flying Kenya Airways, they end up on the Zambian side of the border, and we say, why don't you stay there? You literally walk over the border on the same visa to go and look at the falls. So that's a fantastic opportunity there. North of Zambia, you have Malawi. Now, Malawi's got this incredible lake, but Malawi is an extremely underdeveloped country that's gone through some difficulties. So their infrastructure isn't as good as it could be, but they are putting huge amounts of effort into rebuilding their national park up here, which has, when I last went there, it had leopards and it had giraffes and plenty of plains game, and that's a lovely place to go to. Malawi is not your conventional destination nation. It's not a conventional country, but it's very reasonably priced. So people who want to go to Malawi are certainly getting a Central African experience, and a very genuine experience. And that takes us up to Tanzania, and I have to say, and I'm going to move the map now slightly for this one, because Tanzania is basically the world's #1 safari destination. And for Africa, it's actually the #1 African dive destination. And the reason why is because you have this East African reef that comes all the way down the coast here, which down in Mtwara and up in Pemba and on Mafia, these islands and this headland here, it really is like diving in Indonesia, in the sense that you've got 250 species of macro creatures. You've got a total of 550 species of fish, and you've got coral reefs from which are some of the healthiest I have seen all over the world. You may say that I'm biased, and maybe I am, because I used to dive all the way up and down this coast for 20 years, but it is incredible. There was a reason I chose Tanzania. Tanzania is also home to the Serengeti National Park up here, and down here is you have the Mikumi National Park, Ruaha National Park, and the Selous Game Reserve, which is the size of, I think, Wales or something. I can't remember. It's absolutely massive. The Selous. It's, it takes it takes hours to drive through. I could talk for about an hour and a half about Tanzania alone, so I'm not going to. The beauty about Tanzania is that it's got everything from the medium price to the most luxurious you can imagine. And this is classic Africa. This is the Africa that you see on film sets. And you've got to twin that up with Kenya. Kenya also has some wonderful, high-quality, really good hospitality resorts here on the Kenyan side. In terms of biodiversity, the Kenyans have it, but they don't have the islands off the coast, so you don't have the visibility for the scuba diving. But what you do have is you have some nice hotels down here, and you've got some pretty good national parks here. The Masai Mara is an extension of the Serengeti. The only thing is it's a bit smaller. It's about that size rather than that size. And up here you've got Lake Kenya, Mount Kenya, and you've got the national parks of Samburu further up here, and you've got some really quite incredible lodges out here on the east. So that's generally where it goes on in terms of safari. Rwanda and Uganda obviously are famous for the gorillas. They have the gorillas to see there, and we're happy to organise that for you. So to summarise, looking back at the whole of southern Africa, to summarise your safari destination, you have deserts, infrastructure, floodplains, the world's largest waterfall, leopards and wild dogs, a country that's 20 years behind the rest of its neighbours, which makes it charming, the world's #1 safari destination in terms of quality and diversity, world-class scuba diving here, and I have to say some pretty good scuba diving down here, and you got some reasonable diving here and some world-class parks up here. So really, it depends what you're after. If you're after deserts, floodplains, or the classic plains, the safari plains, it's up to you to decide what you'd like to do, and we will put it together for you. I should say a word about Mozambique. Mozambique has some incredible scuba diving here, but it's quite remote and difficult to get to. And we actually at the moment don't really sell Mozambique. There are good reasons to go to Mozambique, but we have so much here which is so easy to access and do that at the moment we're not doing Mozambique. And finally, not a single word about Africa would be complete without mentioning the British island of St Helena, which has probably the most incredible scuba diving I've ever done in my entire life. It's rock, it's not coral, but it's got 50-meter visibility, 25 wrecks or something, and you've also got schooling whale sharks for 6 months of the year, and just schools of tuna, amberjacks, and all sorts of other things. And that's why I put my old Mykonos down here, to show that that's the place to take underwater photographs. Well, thanks very much for listening, and I sincerely hope you enjoyed the African and Orientalist take on safaris. Generally, you can't go wrong going to any of these countries. Give us a shout on www.orientafricatravel.com, and what we will do is we will get back to you with an itinerary of the country that you want to go to within the budget that you want to spend. Thanks for watching.